Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Literacy View. You asked for Joan, and we got her back. We're so excited. Joan Sedita. All right, for those of you who are not familiar with Joan's work, let me give you a little background about Joan. Her full bio will be put in the show notes, but Joan is an experienced educator serving in the roles of teacher, school administrator, teacher trainer, and literacy consultant since 1975. And I love that you've been in all those roles because you know what it's like to be in the classroom, in the trenches, working with kids who struggle. And, so you get it. Joan developed the comprehension and vocabulary training programs that were the basis for Keys to Literacy's signature programs, the Key Comprehension Routine and the Key Vocabulary Routine. In 2007, she founded Keys to Literacy and is currently the CEO of the company. Joan is the creator of the Writing Rope Framework for writing instruction and the lead author of the Keys to Literacy professional development materials, online courses, and books. Her latest book came out in 2022, The Writing Rope, a framework for explicit writing instruction in all subjects. And we are delighted to have Joan Sedita with us. And her article that just came out, we're so excited. This is breaking news, everyone, is Disciplinary Literacy, integrating literacy instruction in all subjects, grades 6 to 12. So let's dive right in, Joan. Let's talk about what disciplinary literacy means. And maybe you could put it in the context of the 3-tier model that you posted in the article with basic, content, disciplinary, and what those differences are.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks to both of you for having me on again. And so I wrote this white paper. It's quite long. It's about 25 pages last month because I'm in the middle of developing an adolescent training course for teachers. And obviously you can't tackle that topic unless you understand what disciplinary literacy means and how it fits in those other two tiers that you just mentioned. And so I really did a deep dive to kind of read up on everything I could about it. So that's how this came about. But even prior to that, I think the first time I used it was around 2020, 2021. I had put together sort of a very simple framework for middle and high school teachers to think about literacy instruction as different, as hitting different components. So at the simplest level, and I put it together as it relates to an MTSS or multi-tiered system of support model, right? So we have a lot of older students who still struggle with really basic skills. Those students on the bottom level, I call that basic literacy. And depending on what their learning issues are, they're going to need intervention. It might be tier 2, even tier 3. And that intervention needs to target what they specifically need, right? So some of our students, the whole 9 yards needs work, decoding, fluency, right? Other students, maybe their decoding isn't that bad. It's just vocabulary comprehension. So whatever it is. Same with writing. Some of our students need interventions right down to the sentence writing level and others beyond that. So that's the first level. And that, of course, is going to have to be addressed through intervention instruction. We're not going to expect, a 9th grade math teacher or an 11th grade physics teacher to do intervention. The next 2 levels up, which I labeled content literacy and disciplinary literacy, have to do with tier 1 instruction, like good instruction that could be provided across all subjects to all students, whether they struggle or not. So then you might ask, all right, what's the difference between content literacy and disciplinary? Content literacy, it's sometimes referred to as generic comprehensions and vocabulary strategies, study skills, but it's things like summarizing, note-taking, using graphic organizers, teaching students strategies for using the context or morphology to figure out a word that they don't understand. So these sort of broader reading strategies and comprehension strategies, but when it comes to writing, also broader things like knowing the difference between the structure between informational and narrative writing versus argument writing, or knowing just how to write a good solid paragraph or patterns of organization, right? So all those things that are in my writing rope that are writing strategies that kids need to have by the time they're in middle and high school. So that's content literacy. Now, who teaches that? Well, for a long time, it was only ELA teachers. But for a while now, people have accepted that no, that job is too big. We can't just do it 50 minutes a day. We need all teachers to play a role. And the Common Core really promoted that, right? And in my work, when we're out training content teachers on how to teach literacy, it usually focuses on these sort of generic things. So how do you teach kids to write a summary in science versus history versus math, right? So that's content literacy. The highest level up here is this disciplinary literacy. And it's a little bit like, for your folks who understand the old Maslow's triangle, with that, it's your basics of life. Do you have shelter? Do you have food, right? And it's the things at the top. Once those things are taken care of, you can get to those things like being creative. And so disciplinary level literacy is this more advanced set of skills. It's often referred to as being able to read, but also write like a mathematician or an historian or a scientist. And part of what that means, because a lot of people never get further than that, than defining that. So what that really means is not just applying generic reading and writing strategies, but highlighting how you might, for example, and here's a good example, a generic or a content strategy might teach students how to critically think and then write about a compare and contrast of any two things. So those are the fundamentals you'd need to understand, right? And the language you would use. Disciplinary version of that would be, how do you specifically, in a historical context, do an analyze and compare and contrast two primary sources that are in letter format, like a letter from Ben Franklin to Thomas Jefferson. That's that sort of higher level of application. And so it's also much of what kids, as they move into middle and high school, when they're reading textbooks, your more generic approaches to literacy, reading and writing, certainly apply to textbooks, right? But if you were to, let's say, ask a junior in high school to actually try to read an article that in a scientific journal, that would be a lot more complex. So that's what disciplinary is. I hope that kind of gives you the nut in a nutshell.
Yeah, so it's very complicated. I think the average person listening to this, especially if they didn't read the article yet, and I'm hoping everyone does read the article, it will be attached in the show notes. I think most people kind of stop at content, that level. I don't think a lot of people understand that there's a deeper level than going past summarizing and your usual types of like getting the gist, knowing text structure, which obviously is all important. But I don't think that a lot of people know about this disciplinary literacy. And if they do, they wouldn't know the how and when and why and all those questions about how to dig in. So I'm going to bring Judy into this. So Judy, when you read this article, is there anything that stood out to you that perhaps was new information for you, or something that you are confused about, because I'm sure other people listening would have those same questions.
So I want to thank Joan for being here, first of all. When people found out that Joan was coming back, people were going crazy. They were like, oh my God, I'm cooking turkey tonight, or are you recording it? Are you going to have it, released? And we definitely are recording it. So thank you for that. But so when I read the article, I definitely had a lot of questions. This was a little bit an area that I don't know as deeply about as some other areas. The first thing that came to mind was, does this basically relate to making sure that we're teaching literacy in all content areas and not just in our traditional literacy block, but also as we're moving into like different content areas, including, when we're having kids going to social studies clusters and going into their science clusters? And does this disciplinary literacy have to do with what they're doing or what they potentially can do during, the time when they're not in their traditional ELA or English language arts component?
Got to unmute there. Yeah, great question. I think, so let's go back to the 3 levels that I talked about before, right? I think both the content literacy and this disciplinary literacy has to happen in all subjects. All right. So you're right, Judy, that unfortunately, the only sometimes reading and writing instruction that happens is during the ELA block. And I would even say the higher the grade you go, it isn't even happening in English classes because those teachers have a literature curriculum they have to teach. So the first message is we need to be integrating in reading and writing instruction and listening and speaking, right? In all subjects, every teacher has to play a role. Okay, that said, the difference is this disciplinary literacy. Do you want the teachers, the science teachers, to only focus on these high level skills? Or do you approach this that, well, maybe those content literacy skills are sort of the foundational, on top of the real foundation, assuming the basic skills are there, right? Are these content literacy skills really sort of the foundation that you can then build disciplinary literacy on? That is, can you really expect, especially our students who are not reading on grade level, and by the way, the latest NAEP scores in 2022 only have 29% of 8th graders at a proficient reading level. So if we've got 71% of our kids who aren't reading proficiently, should we be jumping right to, let's show you how to read a scientific article the way a scientist would? Like, is that where we should be emphasizing our instruction? Or should we be also having those content teachers work on those more basic and content literacy? So I'm not saying, and here's the thing, what I discovered when I was kind of reading up on it and reading people who've written about this is that most reasonable people will look at that chart that I made, right, and say, of course, we've got to, through intervention, address the basic skills that are missing. And we definitely have to be teaching content literacy. There are decades of research that support that, by the way. Decades of research supporting comprehension and vocabulary strategy instruction. That's a whole other.
Please.
Decades of research supporting that. I think we talked about this in our last January. But the point is, most folks who look at this say, of course, we have to be doing the content. There are some in the field, though, that go right to the disciplinary. And that's, I think, that's the mistake, that because we've got so many kids that don't have skills on those other 2 levels, that to just go straight to that. One of the things that I addressed in this white paper is I had a section about our struggling students, and there, a team of authors, Fagella Luby was the lead on it, but Don Deschler was one of them. This was back in like around 2016, 17. they wrote a piece where they really questioned that we've got to be careful if we only promote disciplinary literacy. If the only message our content teachers get in middle and high school is, oh, it's all about these high level advanced skills, that what about all these kids that don't have the basic skills? And they looked at, I think it was about 140 research articles or pieces that had been done as it related to struggling older kids. And what they found was that only 12 of them addressed disciplinary literacy. And out of the 12, only one studied disciplinary literacy in an area other than literature. So, part of what this gets at is that we don't have a deep research base about even what disciplinary literacy is, and certainly the best way for teachers to do that. So I think it's important for us to think about, sort of the caution that comes across with that. Now, the fact that there's no research or not much, right, that doesn't mean it isn't an important idea. Disciplinary literacy, look, if we want to send our kids off to college to study and become professionals in science and math and history, then of course they need to learn these skills. But what about all of our students who are not going on to post-secondary ed? We have to make sure we're meeting their needs too. And so, there are voices out there who say we just need to be careful. I conclude that what we need is sort of a combination. And I think, as with all things, it depends on the kids in front of us. So if we have a group of students, let's just use those national NAEP numbers, right? Where only 70% of them, up to 70% of them don't have proficient writing. And if I'm, an 8th grade science teacher, I think I would want to suggest that we make sure they can do those basic things like decode a long multisyllabic word and figure it out based on its morphological pieces, right? Or make
Hey,
sure.
where's your cheers button? What's going on tonight? You're muted, Faith. You are muted.
Or making sure our kids know how to take notes from anything, right? Anyway, that's I just feel like we just need to do this cautiously. But for those kids who are in an AP science class in a junior, in their juniors, absolutely go for it, because those kids probably have all these other skills at the content and basic level.
So Judy was give you a cheers to that. So cheers. That was. So let me ask you something, Joan. We've been at this science of reading thing for a long time, right? Actually, you and I go back to reading first, right? So we're going back now, what, over 20 years, 25 years, right? And the science was there, and you're telling us what I heard is we have 70% or more kids not really getting the scores that they need to show that they can handle this type of work. So with all this science of reading, with all these trainings, with all the conferences, with all the work that we're doing, what are we doing wrong? Is that a fair question? Because I kind of feel that we're out there talking the talk, but a lot of people are not walking the walk, and they think that it's being done, but how is it being done? And what's the message that's out there? So what's going on?
Oh, that's a big loaded question. And I wouldn't presume to have the answer. Here's a little bit of what I see as factoring into this. I think, first of all, the emphasis on science of reading and using evidence-based approaches and the push over the last few years to start providing quality professional development to teachers, it has primarily focused on elementary grades and even more specifically K-3, which is a good thing because that's where it begins, right? You know, like the sooner we catch these kiddos and can do something about it, the better. But I've been focused on adolescent literacy for a long time as well. And you know, there is no guarantee that just because students leave third grade and enter fourth and fifth, where we finally catch them up on their skills, especially those foundational skills, there's no guarantee that that means they're going to stay proficient all moving along. We have to keep on teaching them. Now, maybe not your basic phonics skills, and but as they move into fourth and fifth, there's something called advanced word study. And if teachers are not getting trained in how in grades 4, 5, and 6 to teach that advanced morphology and how you tackle those big, long words, then yes, maybe the students have developed solid phonics basic skills to decode. The other thing is fluency. You know, we want to try to get our students by the end of fourth grade to at least 130 words correct per minute. You know, if you look at Jan Hasbrook and Tyndall's fluency norms, by, you know, sixth grade, it should be about 150. Although the fact of the matter is there are older students who are still reading at a 130, 140, but as long as they're accurate, that's fine. I don't mean to digress here, but you know, that fluency has to keep building. But if we don't have our kids reading a lot, then their fluency is going to stay stagnant. What about vocabulary and comprehension? We have to keep growing their vocabulary, and we have to keep, it's not enough, those, for example, out there that say, once you teach a strategy once, kids, they've got it, right? They don't. If you're trying to teach somebody to summarize, you might be able to teach a third grader how to write a 1-paragraph simple summary. But just because they can do that, when they move on to fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh, those teachers have to keep reinforcing those and showing them how do you do it in harder material. And so I think while we're doing a good job of starting to tackle giving the teachers what they need to know about teaching reading in the earliest grades, we're just not thinking beyond grade 4 enough. That's one. The second is it's all been about reading. It's all about reading. You know, you go to a literacy conference and 95% of the workshops are about reading, very little about writing. And yet reading and writing are fused, especially in middle and high school. Just about anything you would do for content literacy. So if you're going to teach kids to summarize or take notes, guess what? That's comprehension and writing. And any of these things in the disciplinary level, you know, if you want to teach kids to write an analysis of a science experiment, it's understanding, comprehension, and writing. So that's the other thing we're missing. We're missing that. And then finally, of course, whether it's for elementary or folks going to become middle and high school teachers, they're getting very little instruction at the pre-service when they're in college. I mean, if there's a lack of coursework for elementary teachers on how to effectively teach reading and writing, there's not enough of it. When you think about somebody going into middle and high, they're lucky if they get one semester of a content literacy course. So those are just some of the reasons I think contributing.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I was listening to you talk about this, all I could think of was the part where you said, you know, some people think you just teach a strategy and that's it. They get it, they move on, and not really practice it. And that's the key, is really the practice. So, Judy, listening to what Joan said, what are the implications for elementary school based on what she is saying? When kids get older and it seems as though they're supposed to have all of these basic skills and general content area type summarizing and that kind of thing, what's the implication in elementary school?
Well, I think Joan is on the money with so many things. And I think that if I have to be completely honest, I don't think that we've provided enough training for our out of classroom teachers, especially our clusters, meaning our social studies teachers, our science teachers. I don't think, my gut feeling is that they've received enough training about what the science of reading is and what the implications are for our children. I think that so much attention has been on the classroom teachers, especially the K-2 teachers in a lot of cases. I think I'm seeing trickles of the science of reading coming to the upper grade teachers, but they're desperate for more. And I think that there's so many missed opportunities that are happening when those children are going into science and social studies. There's a lot of chatter. There's a lot of great discussions happening. There's maybe some experiments happening, but there's missed opportunities to really show kids how to read text, how to decode that text, how to process that text, and not at that higher disciplinary level possibly, but at the simpler level. And I think there's a really big missed opportunity of also showing kids how to write responses to different type of questions, to read something and now they have additional practice to learn how to write. You know, some schools have a writing block that unfortunately is only 30 minutes, and we're squeezing in, the teacher's modeling. Then there's a little bit of practice time for the we do portion of a lesson. And then if you're lucky, sometimes 15, maybe 20 minutes of independent practice. But what a joy and what a great thing it would be, especially with those scores that Joan just mentioned a little while ago, if kids had additional opportunities to get that structured practice when they go to social studies, when they go to science, and when they are learning different content areas, even maybe in music class. I think that there's still a lot that we have to tackle. But I do agree with Joan. There are kids that are ready for more rigor and are ready for more advanced things. Even looking at, screener data that I'm seeing in my school, there's a lot of kids in the system now that we are implementing the science of reading that have cracked the code and they can read. So what are we doing for those kids? Are they ready for that extra challenge? And how are we going to address those challenges?
Yeah.
Do we try to tackle those things, or do we wait?
So here's my question, Joan. What does the high school science teacher, the high school history teacher do when you have kids who can handle higher level work, but then you have probably the majority of the kids in some districts where they might not have basic skills, or they really don't have enough practice in just general content literacy. Just, you're summarizing, you're getting the gist, knowing text structure, those things, and they never really had enough practice in that. How is the high school teacher supposed to function? They have a responsibility to teach their subject, and yet they also have a responsibility to be reading teachers. I mean, that was something that came out of reading first, that content area teachers, everyone's a reading teacher.
Yeah.
So how do you juggle it realistically? How are you supposed to juggle it?
It's not easy. And there's a couple things Judy said. One was a lack of training for the teachers. So if all you know how to do is teach science and you're good at that because you know science, but no one ever showed you how to do any of this stuff, I mean, that's a first step. And I want to pick up, you mentioned music teachers, and I want to share a little story with you, okay? But so don't remind me to get back to the music teacher. But the other issue is that they do have an awful lot of content they have to get through, right? And if they think of this as one more thing they have to add. Like they have to, oh, now I've got to stop teaching science and I've got to teach kids how to take notes. Of course, there's not going to be enough time. There's a metaphor I have used for a long time when I work with content teachers, okay? And it's a metaphor of a plate, okay? Because I've heard content teachers say, I've got too much on my plate already. There's no way I can add anything else. All right, so I sort of flip this around and I talk about it for kids. Imagine that if there's a table and it's a buffet table, all you can eat, and that represents all the content that one needs to learn in any subject. Content that your teachers are going to spoon feed you, but content that you have to learn eventually on your own, okay? So if all I have as a student is a little paper, tiny Dixie plate, right? And I go, and that represents the skills and strategies I have to get that information, right? If that's all I have and I go to that buffet table, I'm only going to be able to put a little on my plate and that's it, because like, it's just, I don't have what it takes. If on the other hand, the teachers can think about this instead of as one more thing that you're going to add to your plate, right? And think about it as what we want to do is build a stronger plate for the students so that they can go and put a lot more on their own plate. And it's that whole difference between, do you want to keep giving the kids the fish? It's the argument I sometimes hear, understand.
Don't just stop shooting. You've opened up the window somewhere.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Can you mute that maybe? Okay, there we go. What was I saying? It's that whole, what I'll also often hear content teachers say, understandably, is my students can't really read text very well, so I don't have them read much. And you say, all right, so how are you teaching them the content? And it's, well, through discussion, I show videos, I do PowerPoint, all right, so you're feeding them the content, and that's good. You'll be able to cover all the content you have to, but it's like feeding them the fish, but you're not teaching them how to fish. And it's this teaching them these comprehension and vocabulary and basic writing in the content area skills and strategies that teaches them how to fish for themselves. So that's the first thing. Let's come back to what the music teacher. I've had three major teacher training courses for almost 20 years now. One is the key comprehension routine, one is the key vocabulary, and one is content writing. In fact, the pieces that are part of comprehension, I wrote with Louisa Moats in module 11 of letters back in 2004. So I have been, along with all the wonderful trainers that I work with at Keys, we have been going into middle and high schools for 20 years now. When there is a school or a district that recognizes the importance of this, and we get to work with not just the subject area, we sometimes have gym teachers and music teachers in our trainings. And what I can tell you is most content teachers want to do this. They just don't know how. And I have, in some cases, when you give them, when you don't overwhelm them. So if all we work on, we're working, for example, the last 3 years, we've been working with the Bethlehem, Pennsylvania school district. The first year we focused just on comprehension strategies. The next year, vocabulary. Now we're in writing. So if you don't hit them with too much at once, and there's a core set of the best evidence base, those teachers are welcome. They're willing to try it. And I have seen some of, when we go back in and we do like coaching and visiting and implementation, I have seen some of the best examples of content teachers integrating content instruction, right? From music teachers, from teachers, like it doesn't have to be science. We have worked with high school voc ed teachers who've done some of the best job of teaching kids how to take notes or how to answer questions. So I think every teacher can play a role. But But just bringing it back to the disciplinary literacy, I think one way that maybe we can convince content teachers to deliver training, a teaching around reading and writing is maybe through the hook of disciplinary literacy. Because especially those who are teaching in the upper grades, right? If they feel like, yeah, I want to produce kids that will be good scientists and mathematicians, then if we can hook them with that, okay, so then your role is to show them how to read and write like a scientist or a mathematician. Then they're going to be more open to teaching them all of this. And then one last point to try to answer Faye's question. I think part of this also, how do you make this happen, is you have to teach kids to understand the concept of differentiation in instruction, of scaffolding, because that's how you meet those kids. So if you've got 8th graders and they still can't decode that text you want them to read, that's where you use differentiation. You let them access the content by listening to it, right? You give them some scaffolds so that they can still participate, which becomes an issue of equity, by the way, so that they can still participate in trying to learn and critically think and participate in discussions about this really challenging science text, right? Or this challenging piece of literature. You allow them to participate through differentiation and scaffolds. So that's another missing piece, I think. It's very hard to know how to do that if you've never been trained about what is it that struggling readers bring to the classroom. What are their issues?
So as I listen to you, Joan, I keep bringing it back to elementary school too, because obviously we're talking about grades 6 to 12, but we need to make sure we're sending these kids off so that more of them, like this, the triangle should be 70% of them should be able to, or more, get to that disciplinary literacy point. Otherwise, how are they going to be ready for college? So, it's we're expecting them. We use these terms, college ready, and how is that even possible? So, Judy, we talk about knowledge-based curriculum and people having different programs in their school with knowledge-based curriculum. And yet, one of the most important things for comprehension is, one, to make sure they have the basic skills, and two, that they have general content comprehension strategies that they can access. So, as a coach, what's the message that you would even give your principal in this, or your teachers in this? Like, what's the takeaway as a coach for you in elementary school, knowing what's coming later, that they're going to need to reach these higher levels of comprehension? Like, what would you be telling them if they're not listening to this right now? What would you be trying to say to them?
Well, I think one of the important things is I actually see some teachers not understanding the different components of why certain pieces of a literacy block are happening. And I'll see like some teachers really strongly feel, that we should only be doing the foundational skills in K-2. And, that opens up the conversation to explaining that there's a reason that we're doing other portions of the literacy block, whether your program be Wit and Wisdom or EL or HMH, because knowledge building is an extremely important piece based on the science of reading of also what we need to be working with kids. That's where you have potentially your read alouds. That's where you have a lot of your think alouds and your gradual release model of doing different skills and that align to the standards and so forth. So I think that I know many people in the field, including administrators, are frustrated because we really want kids to crack the code, especially in K-2. But we also need to understand that kids can understand the gist of a story, even if they potentially can't even write it yet in the early stages. So our jobs as educators is to begin building those scaffolds and teaching those components early on. But I think my fear right now, I'm a little bit before I jumped onto this Zoom call with Joan and Faith, was I saw a whole thread actually on the Department of Education teacher chat. And people just want to throw away whatever program is out there. And guess what? It wasn't only about HMH tonight. People said HMH sucks. People said Wit and Wisdom sucks. People said EL sucks. And
why? Why are they finding this?
I think that what's happening is people are overly relying on programs to be the cure to our literacy problem. And I think it comes back to what, I've been saying on the Literacy U for a very long time. Yes, some programs are going to be a little bit easier to navigate than others. Some are easier to implement than others. But there's honestly no such a thing as a perfect program. And I think it comes back to understanding pedagogy and understanding what it means to teach kids how to read, but also how to understand. And once we understand those key components, whether it be K to 2, 3 to 5, at the high school level, at the middle school level, we'll get much further. But my concern right now, from what I'm seeing, is there's a lot of pushback from unions. Unions are getting involved. Teachers are actually signing petitions right now, which is very terrifying to me. And like I said, Faith, I told you it once. I got an email again. It's probably some spam. I don't know how to get rid of it. Lucy Corkin's emails are coming into my inbox every single day now. So my fear is that we're really going to miss the boat and not get this right. And people are going to be like, oh, the science of reading isn't working.
That's exactly. Okay, I want to stop you right there.
Let me go get a drink of water. Hold on 1 second.
That's exactly what I was thinking as well. That as I'm listening to you, Joan, I'm thinking of what's going on in the elementary school. Just what Judy said, that I don't feel like we're getting it right now. Even though, we have all this information out there. We have the internet, we have lots of training, we have lots of conferences. And yet, if you listen to teachers, and I see what Judy's seeing, the same thing, that people who have these comprehensive programs are rebelling because they're overwhelmed with the program. And I think they don't understand that there are these I'm going to use your word, keys to literacy that they're not getting a chance to utilize, or they're not being able to have a chance to practice. That so much is being thrown into these programs that I don't know if we're getting it right. Even though this should be the time when we are getting it right. So could you give us...
Faith, let me just chime in. Teachers don't even have time anymore because they're under such strict budgeting requirements. They're not even given time to do a regular good old-fashioned read aloud anymore. So how can we get to that disciplinary level that Joan is mentioning when we're like in such a rigid environment right now that kids aren't even being exposed to that rich, beautiful text, or just sitting on the floor and reading stories like The Three Wishes or The Magic Fish or Rumpelstiltskin and stuff like that?
Judy, I love your passion. So I was jotting down some notes to kind of, because there's a couple of things that you touched on. I think first, we have to remember, look, the National Reading Panel reminded us over 20 years ago that there are 5 components. There's actually more. There's oral language and right, but and so I think, yes, part of what's happening is in the earliest grades, I think it's great we're finally teaching foundational skills in an explicit way, but you're right. I think some people are focused on that and not as focused on, but we also have to worry about those other things. So that's one point. And I've done a lot of reviewing of research around vocabulary instruction, comprehension instruction, and a lot of those things you can begin as early as kindergarten. You just do them orally. All right. So we're not hitting all the 5 components. That's one. But the other thing I wanted to say is you're right. I love this quote. I don't even know where I heard it, but programs don't teach reading, teachers do. And so that goes to that they need that background information. I can remember, again, 20 years ago with Reading First, when all these publishers first came out with their programs. If the teachers don't know why and how to use, right, so that comes back to the teacher knowledge. But the other thing is, even in K-3, where there's this longer block to teach literacy, we forget that literacy can be infused all the rest of the day. And as kids move into 3rd and then 4th and 5th, your EL block is one period. That's why, and it's just as true as you go up. Teachers need to know how to teach reading and writing so that during science time and social studies time, they get to practice all those things that they're introducing, right? And it's not just about to literature and narrative text, it's to informational text. So this whole notion of making sure we integrate reading and writing into every subject all day, that's part of it. It's the only way we're going to grow our kids' vocabulary. So that's another piece to it. But to, again, bring this back to disciplinary literacy, we've been talking so far about it being this sort of really advanced thing that you would teach, especially as kids move into high school. The fact of the matter is, parts of the concept of disciplinary, right, which is that you want to make kids aware that there are differences. When you read something scientific, it's going to read a different way. When you're reading something in math, even in a 4th grade math textbook, the language of math, it uses a lot of symbols and Greek alphabet, right? And it uses vocabulary that most people think they know the word, like plane, right? Or solve, or I can't think of a few others now, that when you use those really common vocabulary words with math, it's used in a completely different way. So there are things that are unique about science. And when you're doing an experiment, there's certain things you have to think about. Well, what were the, what was your hypothesis? And did what you did at the end of the experience prove you can actually start to introduce those things that are unique to different subject areas as early as grade 4. Not necessarily having a 4th grader read a scientific article, right? But, even things around primary documents, showing kids, and this is the difference between, I used this example before. You can teach kids to do a compare and contrast, to understand what you want to look for, what's the language that's used, and how you might write a compare and contrast. That's your content strategy, right? But if you're comparing 2 historical documents that have archaic language in them, that's the disciplinary part, right? Now, you're not going to ask a 4th or 5th grade to read those archaic documents, but you can begin to have them start to see what a primary source is. So I guess by way of wrapping it up, I'm trying to think if I had one other point here, because you had such good points, Judy. No, I think that's about it. Oh, I know. Let's connect also back to the background knowledge thing. And it's the point that I made in that January blog post that you had me on about, right? That it's not either or. It's not, the answer is let's just teach them lots more science and social studies and math. And by having that background knowledge, it will make them better comprehenders. Yes, the more kids know about a subject they're going to read, obviously, the easier it is to read it. But it's not either or. We have to explicitly teach kids skills and strategies, whether it's for vocabulary or comprehension, or whether it's how you write a good paragraph, right? How you use transitions, how you write a good statement of your position or your claim for an argument piece. Those are the content literacy skills that our kids need. And if this both the goal of more knowledge, but the goal of content teachers teaching kids how to apply the content literacy in science, in math, in history, in music, even in PA and art class, that's how you build more knowledge, because you're using the teaching of the knowledge to have them write about it and critically think about it. It's the fusing of all of it across the whole day.
Well, that was a great summary. I was actually going to ask you, Joan, if you could give an example, and you really just did. That was a very clear example. So, Judy, do you have any last questions for Joan or comments that you want?
Joan, if for our audience, for some people, this is a newer topic, if you had to really break it down one more time, can you break it down really simply, the difference between content and disciplinary literacy, so that our viewers walk away really like 100% understanding it clearly?
So
And how that can relate to what they're doing in the early years, middle years, and high school years.
So content literacy is, as I said before, these sort of generic, they tend to be routines, and it could be for vocabulary instruction, it could be for comprehension, it could also be for writing in the content areas, right? So they're more generic. Use of graphic organizers, predicting strategies. You know what they are. And we can begin introducing them in the primary grades. A lot of it's through oral language, and we want to keep focusing on them because, as I said before, you know how to maybe take notes in 4th grade, it doesn't mean you know how to up the ante to take notes in 8th grade. Okay, so that's your content literacy. And any teacher can and should be integrating that while they're teaching whatever their content is. All right. Disciplinary literacy is much more specific, right? It is, it's what's unique about writing or reading in math versus science versus literary analysis, all right? And what's interesting about disciplinary, unlike content literacy that you sort of can apply, now you do need content teachers to show kids how you would apply something, how a content strategy to that subject area. So in a sense, it's a little disciplinary literacy going on right there, right? But what's different is these disciplinary skills and strategies are unique not only to a subject area like science, right? But they're unique sometimes down to a granular level. So if I'm reading something in Scientific American, I might need to teach my kids something unique about how to tackle that kind of text versus if I'm having them read something else in science that's written a little bit differently. Or in math, think about this. The way geometry is written about is different than the way algebra is. Algebra uses formulas. Geometry doesn't. So it's that highly specific, unique thing that's unique to that particular subject area, right? And it often is not generalizable to other areas in science or in math. It's really it's just very specialized. And
I think that's the word, Joan. Special.
Yeah, and unique. I've seen the word unique. I've seen the word unique used also.
So Joan, what would be your recommendations for our viewers to walk around to understand when to go one route versus another route, and just so that they feel very clear?
Yeah, I think I would not phrase it as you choose one route or the other. What we want is the best of both worlds. And, in the white paper that I wrote, I dedicated a whole section to it shouldn't be one or the other, right? That depending on the grade, depending on the subject, depending on the students, The degree to which you get into the disciplinary instruction will vary. So that's the first thing. There are also some, one of the ways I ended the piece with was, all right, so what are some because you know me, I'm a practical person, right? I don't want to just like define what these things are and what the research says, right? But what are the practical things? So the last part, I have a whole section on, all right, so what are the instructional suggestions that support both content and disciplinary literacy, right? Obviously, whenever you're having the kids do any kind of text, read, that you want to take a few moments to just say, hey, what's unique about this because it's in our subject? That's a simple thing, right? That's the first one. The second is follow what the research tells us about secondary education, right? In literacy instruction. If you go back to Camel et al., it's one of the IES, the last full IES reports that analyzed adolescent literacy. Sharon Vaughn did it more recently in her team, but as it relates to struggling older kids. But what were the 5 findings? Number 1, explicitly teach vocabulary strategies. 2, explicitly teach comprehension strategies. 3, have kids discuss and critically think about text, right? The 5th one is do intervention. So follow well-established research. When it comes to writing, look at Graham et al.'s. Look at their writing next. Look at the IES reports, effective writing for secondary students. Whatever those research findings are telling you, make sure you're doing them. What else? Use an explicit approach. I, we, you, whatever it is, whether you're teaching them disciplinary or content or even basic skills, be explicit about it, right? Always make sure you preview vocabulary before kids read, because it will stop them from stumbling over those words when they're reading. Make sure you're thinking out, planning your lessons for which are the most effective before, during, and after comprehension strategies for that particular thing that you're doing. 2 more, make sure you just give opportunities for kids to discuss, but use protocols. So things like text talk and accountable talk. We have to teach kids how to talk about what they're thinking and reading and learning. And then finally, let's not forget about the value of teaching close reading. That got sort of lost. It was an important part of Common Core and the teens, right? 20 teens. But any teacher can sit down, grab a paragraph from whatever they want the kids to read, and spend 10 minutes just pulling it apart with the kids. Ooh, why did they use that word? Ooh, let's look at that sentence. That's really long and complex. What do you think it means, right? That's that close analytical reading. We've got to model that for kids. It's part of explicit instruction. So those are bigger instructional guidelines that all of them, everything I just rattled off, has got strong research behind all of it. And that can be applied whether it's content literacy or disciplinary literacy.
Joan, we thank you for joining us. This was extremely helpful. And like you said, sometimes we touch on this at a surface level, but this was a really deep dive into comprehension. And if we want our kids to be college and career ready, we have to really give serious thought to disciplinary literacy. So thank you for joining us. This was great.
This was amazing. Faith, can I interrupt? I have one more question that's on my mind that I saw in the field, and it might not be
killing Joan.
Joan, I promise this is the last one.
Okay.
All right. So recently I was walking around classrooms, and a lot of principals are looking at standard alignment, and I saw a lesson where a teacher was teaching a standard that was a grade level above, but the program was saying to teach the lesson on theme. However, it wasn't directly a standard for that grade. How do you feel about that? I'm just curious.
Well, look, starting with the Common Core, standards that came out, which a lot of states adopted. Now, since then, they've adopted their own, they've modified them, but I can tell you that 90% of the state standards are some version of Common Core anyway, right? You know, Common Core isn't meant to be the end all and be all, and it wasn't meant to be a curriculum. What it attempted to do, and what all ELA standards do, is to try to say, what kinds of skills should kids attain by a certain grade in order to be eventually college and career ready? That's what they are. So while looking to those standards should help guide us, and you know, there's an awful lot in them when you look under the sections that have to do with comprehension, reading of literature and informational text, things like getting the gist of things, finding the central idea. So, to a certain degree, the standards do support a lot of what we know from research about, also about effective vocabulary instruction. So that's good, but they're not a curriculum. One of the things about the standards is it does let you know, it's the flip of what you said, Judy. If you've got a student there's a standard, let's say for grade 4, to be able to do something, and you've got a 5th and 6th grader and they still can't do it, well, guess what? You got to go back and make sure that you do it. Now, you just had the flip where it's maybe a 5th grader, it's a 6th grade standard, but they're starting to introduce it in 5th. Why not? If the kids are ready for it.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you.
I hope that's it. I think if I could have one last word, one thing that I definitely walked away with by reading up on everything I could on disciplinary literacy is that we need a lot more research. We need tons more. There isn't. And so until we have that to guide our decisions about how much and what grade do you start at and what does it look like, we have to just go with kind of common sense. But I think that's the way I'd want to leave this for any researchers who might be listening. Let's start doing more research about disciplinary literacy so that maybe 8 or 10 years from now, we have some better guidelines.
Did you hear that, researchers? Pick up on what Joan said and then get in touch with us and introduce it on the Literacy View. So thank you. This was a great conversation, and we'll see you next time.